Welcome to our LB's The Lover of Books author chat. Gillian McAllister is our novelist today. We're here to talk about Wrong Place, Wrong Time. She is a British Sunday Times and New York Times bestselling author known for 7 novels, all of which have been bestsellers. She has been selected by the Reese Witherspoon Book Club, the Richard and Judy Book Club, and the Radio 2 Book Club, and shortlisted for the National Book Award. Several of her novels have been optioned for television and film, and we're all going to want to know more about that at the end if there's more info. And this book, Wrong Place, Wrong Time, has reached 4th on the Sunday Times bestseller list and number 2 on the New York Times bestseller list, also being published in 10 foreign territories. The New York Times bestselling author Chris Whitaker, we all love that book, we begin at the end, says, a work of such genius it leaves you in awe. Wrong Place, Wrong Time is impossibly clever, daringly original, and heart-rending exceptional. I love that. Then Lisa Jewell says, it's a masterpiece. I had my mind blown apart. After I finished it, I sat with my mouth hanging open in awe. One of the best books I've ever read. I think we can all agree to that, to both those quotes. That's why we're all here tonight. Thank you so much, Gillian, for joining us.
Thanks for having me. That's a very nice intro.
Well, I mean, I love the premise. Can you stop a murder after it's already happened? So I want to start because your book started at the end. So I'm going to start a little bit at the end with your acknowledgments. And the only part I want to talk about right now is you gave us your blurbs of text to your friend Holly. So what made you think, I know you'd watched a movie and now you have this idea and you text her. Where does it go from there?
Well, I think because it's quite a low pressure environment to just text somebody an idea, it kind of coalesced on WhatsApp to her, really. So I watched Russian Doll and then I watched a segment on knife crime. And I just suddenly thought about stopping a murder in a kind of time loop. And then immediately you'll see in the acknowledgements, my next text was, unless you start on yesterday. And then the day before. And really that, I mean, it doesn't happen very often with writing. Usually a premise takes a lot more molding than that. But that was the premise for me. I knew, you know the beginning and you kind of know the end. She has to stop the murder. And that's the dream premise, really, because it tells you what the whole book needs to be. So shortly after that, I sent it to my agents, just like, do you think this is too speculative? That was my first question. And they liked it. And then it started to kind of marinate in my mind over that winter before I started writing the next summer.
Well, I loved it. Everybody I've seen on Instagram loves this premise. It was such an amazing idea and it had such effect on so many. I still keep thinking about it. But how do you actually research time travel? I mean, it's such a bizarre, I mean, it's a concept, right, that I have no idea. I mean, I'm a lawyer as well. So I don't really have a background in this. So what did you do to figure out how you were going to make it work?
Well, I think time travel, as far as sci-fi goes, is fairly in the mainstream. You know, it's a little bit like sliding doors, like it's been adopted as a concept that non-sci-fi readers can kind of engage with. And I did think for a long time, do I need a reason why she's time traveling? You know, should she be in an accident and have a head injury or that kind of thing? And eventually I decided not to, because I sort of thought it's more compelling if that's part of the driver of the plot, is why is this happening to her? But I decided to make it very realistic and have her, you know, speak to her friend who's a doctor and try and tell her husband what's happening. And I think all of the things that, you know, the ordinary woman would maybe do in this situation. And then I did, I read a lot on Reddit, because I find Reddit quite an interesting place. There are people on Reddit who are claimed to be time travelers, and obviously you can't prove otherwise, really. And I read people who have experienced really intense deja vu, and have sort of unexplained things happen, like they did the same journey home from work twice, and they can't account for it. And then I emailed a guy who wrote a paper. I think he was at Yale University. He wrote a paper on whether it would be possible to enter a time loop. He's like a a physicist. And we had a Zoom actually where I said, if this had to be possible, what would the explanation be? And he was super helpful, not least because I put him wholesale as the character Andy in the book, even down to the Great Gatsby t-shirt that he's transplanted out of Zoom and into the book. So that was the best research, really, because it actually became character.
Well, I was wondering, before I read the end with the acknowledgements, I thought, why J.D. Salinger? Like, I was going to ask why the author came up, but the explanation was perfect. And so was that part easy or hard, or, just working that scientific? Have you done that in the past? Because this is my first novel by you. So have you worked in elements like this before? Or is this unique?
It's mostly unique. I generally write straight crime fiction, really. It always has an emotional angle. One of my other books, The Choice, is a sliding doors thriller about a woman who, in one iteration, hands herself in after committing a crime, and in the other goes on the run. So that has a similar vibe, actually. But mostly this was the first book I wrote that definitely is speculative in genre. And I liked it because it's quite liberating. Like, once you build the world, you just have to follow the rules. It didn't require as much research as something, I've just written a police procedural, and that required an awful lot of research, because that's actually something in reality that I needed to sort of understand in order to play within the rules, whereas this was a bit more free and easy, really.
And did this give you a taste to step more into speculative fiction, or do you plan to, rest solidly in the crime world?
Yeah, I think regardless of whether it's speculative or not, what I like to do is use a structure or a device to kind of explore the effect a crime has on people. And the one I'm currently writing is about a live streamed hostage situation. So it is not speculative, but it's got that Black Mirror kind of element. And I kind of like that, like one foot in something a little bit different, even if it's not sci-fi and aliens and stuff. So yeah, I do dabble a bit. I think I'm not very good at staying in genre as authors go.
Well, I appreciate that you're willing to step outside, because I think that's what makes them original, and it makes us feel like it's not something we've read before. That I think that's why everybody's sort of sinking their teeth into it, is because it is a step outside the genre, and so character emotional field. Like, it's really fantastic. Now, I mentioned I was a lawyer, but I read in your bio that you too were a solicitor, and so of course the main character has that background as well. What did you bring to the table or did you put any of yourself into Jen when you were writing this?
No, not really. It was sort of an accident, really. And it's weird because a lot of people in America think it's my debut, and obviously I've written an autobiographical, lawyer character, but actually it's my 7th novel, published in England. And it just made sense for her to be a lawyer for so many reasons. She had to understand a degree of police procedure to try and investigate what her son did. I wanted her to be a bit of a workaholic to explore that kind of mom guilt angle. And I needed her to be super logical. And it occurred to me that I'd never written a lawyer in 7 novels, probably because I felt like I didn't want to do that while I was still practicing. And then, it took a few books to kind of process it, maybe. But yeah, she's a divorce lawyer. I wasn't. But I'd say there are some similar traits, the internalization that she does of this has happened, therefore it must be something I did. I think that's something all women do, actually. But I definitely have that trait. I think Jen keeps it together a bit more than I would. She's fairly pragmatic about it, whereas I think I'd be freaking out.
Yeah, I thought that same thing a couple of times. And when, you mentioned the characteristic of overthinking and worrying so much about what others think. And so many times, and I know that Kelly says this to her, like, why does that even matter? Why do you even worry about things like that? But I think so many times women do that to themselves and put so much pressure, in society and appearance, with neighbors, with friends, with family, to have this certain level. And I appreciated you putting that into her character, because I think that's what makes this story work, right? Because if she were so self-confident, I don't know that it could have been the same story.
Yeah, and I think I have had experience of that more than most, because people talk about me online all the time, and so I've had to maybe come to terms with people are going to think what they're going to think, and you kind of have to be willing to be misunderstood at times. And I think I've put a lot of that scrutiny into Jen, really, which I sort of enjoyed writing about, that feeling of, am I doing the right thing, and are people sort of watching? That's like, Jen feels that in her day-to-day life, and I do because of my profile, really.
Now, are you practicing at all now, or have you switched 100% to writing?
No, I left in 2018.
Okay.
And actually, I was just talking to my husband yesterday, and I said, I still kind of feel like I might have to go back one day. And he said, you're never going back to law. I don't even think the law would have me now, nearly 5 years out. It's longer than I practiced for, actually. So it's kind of but the law kind of never leaves you, does it? Because it's they train you up to think in a certain way. And I don't think you can kind of forget that.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because, you have these writing skills, I think, also because of having gone through law school. And I'd interviewed Vaishnavi Patel for Kaiki, and she was taking the bar. She went to Harvard and then was taking the bar, practicing, studying for it as the interview was happening. And so I don't think it does leave you, but I think the skills you get really are a benefit. It seems like for writers that they have that.
Yeah, like most cases are a narrative, and a lot of my books are organized by evidence. I do think it's like a way of thinking. So yeah, and not to mention a work ethic. Like law instills a work ethic like no other, really. Like even just today, a Sunday, I felt guilty for not actually doing anything, and that's mad because most people are off.
Well, and how far I don't know if everybody knows, but you're pregnant, and how
Yeah.
far along are you? Because I think taking a Sunday break is well deserved.
Yeah, I'm very far, 34 weeks now. And because I'm kind of trying to get a draft done before the baby comes, so that a post I can just be editing. I'm kind of working myself harder than ever, which I did have to say to myself, like, you do not have to like do a year's work in the next 6 weeks. So yeah, but yeah, 34 weeks, I'm enormous.
Well, congratulations. I think you look
Thanks.
fantastic.
Thank you.
All right. So was it always the decision to have the main character be the mother then? Was it ever a thought maybe it could be the father, or was that an easy decision?
No, it was always the mother, actually. The thing I toyed with was whether he should die and she's trying to stop his murder. But then I thought it was so much more interesting and sort of less magical. Him being alive the next day after being killed is maybe more speculative. And then I thought, wouldn't it be interesting if it's like a why done it? And it's kind of like, that we need to talk about Kevin kind of vein of, I didn't know my son was capable of this. And obviously it's a very different book. But yeah, it was always that mother-son thing that I wanted to write about. And, most of my novels really have that kind of parenthood element, really.
Now, when we talk about twists, okay, so if you haven't read, we're going to be getting into this at some point, and we're going to dive a little bit in right now. So you might want to mute or go to the YouTube chat afterwards. But in general, how do they come to you? Like, do you write it out and as it comes, ooh, that's a good twist, I can get to that? Or is it very much a planned outline and let me write to those twists?
It's a bit of both.
Okay.
In this book, they kind of wrote themselves, which is very unusual. And, usually I have an outline. Often I have a twist that I really want to make work. So I will base the book around it if I think it's good enough. But yeah, in Wrong Place, Wrong Time, I don't know. I wanted to narrate from Ryan's perspective, and I just wanted to do that. And I thought he was really interesting, and he just came off the page for me. And then it got more and more clear what I could do with that, and the kind of double bluff that I do with who he really is. So yeah, it was quite an organic process actually, which usually you have to plan a twist. Like, I'm definitely not the kind of writer that can just do a surprise twist and have it work, but it did in this. I think I had so much time, like I wrote it across multiple lockdowns here, and I had so much time and it was all I did. I think I perhaps did a lot more thinking than I would normally do along the way. At the moment, I'm writing a book and I'm just trying to meet my word count, and I don't feel like I have a lot of headspace. Whereas Wrong Place, Wrong Time, like, I had so much time to work in.
Well, some authors said they couldn't even write during quarantine. How did you feel? Was it easy coming out? I mean, you said you were a lot in your head and you could think it through. How was that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I am privileged. I had a fortunate experience of the pandemic. It was just boring. My husband was at home, so I was less isolated. Obviously we couldn't do anything. So all I did was walk the dog and write. And for me, it was kind of a solace I remember that we had a November lockdown here that was intended to be like a little circuit breaker. And then we went into a January lockdown right after that. And it was so depressing. And I remember saying to my friend, I'm just going to go and write a really good book because there's nothing else on the table this winter. And it was satisfying to feel as though I was doing that. And the whole time I wrote this book, I knew it changed my life. And I've never said that about a book before. And it did. And it's quite satisfying that that's actually come to fruition now, and that I was kind of right in that respect.
Is it just that you had the confidence in this book that you knew what you had when it was in your hands? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, like I knew it was a unique concept. I'd seen the reaction to it from my agents.
Mm-hmm.
But as I was writing it, I just knew it was working. And you can't really, that doesn't happen very often as a writer. It's usually in the very last draft where you're like, oh, thank God it does work. Whereas this one, I kept saying to my friends, I feel like, I don't know, like I'm building a bonfire and I was about to just pour petrol all over it. And when I sent it off, I said, I've lit the bonfire. Like, I don't know, it was just a really weird, mystical process where I just knew it was going to go big.
Well, I mean, not that I'm happy that, the quarantine happened, but I am glad that we got this product from it because, it is fantastic. I did have a question. Well, the first twist, if you go in not knowing anything, which I try to do on a book like this, I don't want to read anything, is the first twist, I feel like, was when you read the part about the murder. You don't even know that it's her, you think it's the son that she's holding, right?
Yeah.
Because it's not very clear. But the question I have was, you mentioned two feathers. What's the significance of the two feathers?
The significance of the two feathers is just, I think when traumatic things happen, things slow way down. And Jen notices those feathers coming out of his jacket. And it was partially a way to obscure, so she didn't have to use a name. She could say she's looking at these two feathers, partially because I think white feathers tend to signify some like death, I think. But mostly just because, I was in hospital in December for something fairly minor but traumatic. And I noticed oval shaped rings on a curtain around my bed, and that they didn't form complete holes. So, and I still remember them. And I think that's what happens in trauma. And that's kind of what I was trying to show. Like, I think you just notice crazy small detail when your brain is kind of going, I can't deal with this mad big situation. I'm just going to look at the detail, maybe.
Well, for me, I loved that twist because by the time I got to the name, when I realized, oh, she's holding, the victim is not her son, then I go back and that's when I really noticed the feathers, right? Because I'm rereading. I'm like, wait a minute, did I miss something? And so, but I think I felt more in tune with Jen at that point, because that's when she really starts noticing things. Like she starts observing intensely, because that's going to be her job for the rest of this book, right? And so that's sort of when I became Jen in ways, it was really an interesting way to attune to these minute details early on in the book, because I thought, okay, now I got to pay attention. We've got two feathers here, something's up, So
yeah, that's so interesting.
Now, when did you debate with yourself, because we talked about quarantine in your life, did you debate whether or not to put it into this novel? Because we really didn't hear, anything about, but it was covering these years. So
Yeah.
did you think about that, or make a decision, or just went with the flow?
It was in it, and I thought it was
Mhm.
kind of ideal because it opens in 2022 when life is sort of back to normal. And actually, she only lands in 2021 once when they go to Wagamama's.
Right.
And I thought that I had a masked server in that scene. And when she goes to the beer garden where she sees Kelly in the pub in Liverpool, there were social distancing signs scrubbed off. And then when she takes the taxi and sees Kelly's kind of second house, there was a mask around the stick shift, as you would call it. But they actually got edited out because at the time we went to print, it was late 2021. Is that right? Yeah. And Omicron was just taking off. And we just thought, we don't know if people are going to want to read. Like, we didn't know if we were heading back into lockdown then, really. So they got taken out, which I think was maybe the right thing to do. But I do like to reflect the world around me. And so they're in the next book. And it's been up for debate whether they should be, but I think I'm not going to write a book about COVID, but I think it's the way of the world now. Like, there are still perspex screens in strange places, and there are arrows for one-way systems still on pavements, and I find that kind of interesting as a writer.
I didn't feel like, because it wasn't included, that it was ignoring society or ignoring this time period, because I even started to check the dates, like, wait a minute, where are we? And so that leads me to a new question. Why did you decide to label the chapters as you did, day one, with hours instead of months and years?
I wanted it to be day -1 and day -2 because that was kind of the structure. Like, she is one day before the murder rather than a date. And as a reader, personally, if a chapter said the 23rd of October and then the next one said the 22nd, I'd be like, wait, what was the other one? Like, have we gone back or forward? Like, I think the minus days just helped. And the time is purely pragmatic, just because without the timestamps, the chapters were so long. And I do think short chapters in thrillers are best. So we split them up according to day -1, 8 a.m., day -1, 8 p.m., etc., just to give it that more page turning quality.
Well, I love that. I mean, I love that we had those markers, but even more so, I love that you reference time through the iPhone, because we all, I mean, if you're
Don't we all?
an Android user, but if you have an iPhone, I was right there with you. I was like, oh my gosh, yes, I remember that blocky phone now.
Yeah.
And especially when you got back to the computer usage with the dial-in, I thought, but I even remember how to do that. Like, it's just a totally different time. So was that intentional, just to give you markers as to where we were in time?
Yeah, like, readers need a marker, and tech is the thing. If you walk into a house, this room 20 years ago would probably look like this room, except that television there would be different. The bookcase would be the same, the walls would be the same. And so tech is the fastest moving thing. So it was easy for me to kind of think the biggest tell would she'd have a different phone. And, it's the thing most of us reach first for in the morning. And then when she didn't have one anymore, and she was like, how do you know the date without a mobile phone? Like, I found it kind of interesting to ponder.
Well, and that she could no longer track his movements at some point as well, because
which was very handy for plot by that point, because I kind of needed him to be more obscure by then, so it kind of worked in my favor.
Yeah, I love that part. Now I want to go back to your acknowledgements, because you quoted this: and my father, of course, for many of the chats, invaluable suggestions, and for being my first reader always. And so I just wanted to bring on a special guest, and I'll let you do the introductions. Go ahead.
Everyone, this is my dad, Tony, his debut press experience with me. We thought we'd bring him on. kind of fire some questions at him if anybody has any. But yeah, he is my first reader. He's read my next book, and not many people have. And he does suggest something invaluable for every novel. Absolutely, definitely. Often the twist.
Well, I have a question. Is the conversation on phone, Zoom, in person? How do y'all communicate?
All of the above, really. Often dog walks.
Okay.
During quarantines, we did a lot on Zoom, but it's far better to be in person. I can ask incisive questions when we're together with no pressure, whereas on Zoom or on a phone call, there's always something else going on. Yeah.
Have you always been an avid reader, or have you done writing in your past?
No to both.
I think I did a little of the latter. So I was always a non-fiction reader, so like scientific stuff, newspapers, but never really read like one novel a year. That's changed recently for obvious reasons. But I always used to tell stories, Jill. I could embarrass Jill about some of the stories I told her at bedtime when she was little, and still do with the grandkids. Maybe another one soon.
I'm sure.
Definitely. So what's the process? Like, what's it like working with Gillian?
It's mostly great fun I feel like privileged to be involved at all, because I have zero ability to, like most of us, to write a book. And it's a little weird because Jill will ask me something, and maybe I have some idea about the book she's currently working on, but I kind of forget it. And then she'll ask me, and I'll just, okay, well, I'll pretend that I don't know anything about it. Can you just remind me where we are with it? Because they tend to change. The original germ of the idea is never what it is 6 weeks later, let alone 6 months later. So I get her to reiterate where we are with it, and then she'll generally ask me how would this character behave, or what would they think about something, and that prompts me to say, well, tell me about this character. And sometimes the character's a piece of cardboard at this point, not real yet, and then we have a conversation about, and then suddenly her eyes will light up. I don't feel like I've done anything, and she'll go, oh yeah, I've got it, thank you.
That is very accurate.
What do you think of the process, Gillian?
Yeah,
Working with your dad.
I think it works best when I'm kind of after the initial stage where I just don't know what the book's going to be. I get to a point where I have specific questions, and that is what, like, I decided I wanted Wrong Place, Wrong Time to go 20 years back, and I was thinking, how could somebody have kept a secret for 20 years, and why, and what would be the trigger in the present day? And my dad said, I remember exactly where we were walking my dog. He didn't have his dog then at that point, and he said 20 years is a prison term. And that, that is such a fundamental part of that book, that's the reason why it all happens. And that's the kind of thing that happens. And I think really it's somebody actively listening and caring, not just being like, yeah, sounds good, but actually caring about the detail. And often when you're talking to somebody who's actively listening, you come up with stuff by yourself as well as hearing from them. I think that's like a large part of it.
Well, he sounds like a great sounding board
Yeah.
And that gave me the chills when you said, it's a prison term. Like, I know where that was going.
Yeah, I know. And you have to be in the right place where that's a missing piece. And that was the missing piece for me. And it takes a while to get there, because when you're at the very beginning, it just feels like chaos. The novel, it could be anything.
Well, Tony, what's your favorite part of all of this?
You know what, Beth, Laura, I have not read any of Jill's books' final version. because I'm always like more or less the first reader, and there's loads of editing that goes on afterwards. So there are many things that people will tell me about Jill's books, and I go, I don't remember that because it wasn't there. Just, it wasn't included, you know. So I mean, I loved in this particular book. I absolutely loved the synergy with the pumpkin. I don't know if do Americans have pumpkins? Do they carve pumpkins? Yeah,
we do.
I just loved that. You know, that's a date in the calendar that, you know, is everybody knows it. This is what you do. And then when the pumpkin wasn't carved, that was just like spine chilling. You know, you just, wow, what's happened? Yeah.
Absolutely. What about you, Gillian? What's the best part of getting to work with your dad?
Yeah, I think it's the total privilege of how big it's all become. And, you know, I have multiple agents and publicists and film agents and all sorts. And it's still me and my dad on a dog walk going, does that sound plausible? And he's like, yeah, I think it's plausible. And it's a really like authentic thing to do. You know, it's still me at my kitchen table, even though it's become this thing that's gets published to hundreds of thousands of readers. But the process is identical, which it surprises me, and I think surprises other people, because I think they think by this point you should be in a boardroom with, you know, 10 people, but it isn't that at all. It's me and my dad kind of going, yeah, it sounds about right.
Very true. Yeah.
Well, I think it's fantastic that y'all have that. One, you live close enough to be able to do those dog walks and have that back and forth, because what valuable time together. And it sounds like y'all are a great working team.
I think so.
Yeah, it's good fun as well. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, Tony, thanks so much for joining us. I really am so glad that you're here on the call, and feel free to type in any questions to your daughter that you want her to answer. Thanks so much. All right, be thinking of what questions you would like to ask, and I am going to do some rapid fire questions, Gillian. This is kind of the LB's thing that we do. Are you ready? Don't think about it too much, just answer. All right.
Okay.
Welsh or a British accent?
Welsh for Kelly.
City, suburbs, or countryside?
Countryside, definitely.
Coffee or tea?
Coffee. I'm very much missing it.
Are you a lark or a nightingale?
A nightingale, absolutely.
Solicitor or writer?
Right.
Your best takeout or takeaway? I'm not sure the phrase there. What do you like to eat?
Chinese.
Do you know if you're having a baby boy or a baby girl?
It's a boy.
A boy. And do you have a name?
No, but he is due on day 0. How weird is that? The day the clocks go back. 30th of October. Yeah.
Okay,
I know.
It's crazy.
It's crazy. I've like manifested him.
Seriously. I'm starting to think there's something with this deja vu. So
yeah.
All right. So I have lots of questions, but I would absolutely love it if our readers here have questions. It looks like we do. So I'm going to go ahead and spotlight and unmute. All right, go ahead. Oh, you're still muted. There you go.
Are you talking to me?
Yes, go ahead, Wendy.
Okay. I just want to say one of my favorite things about this book was when she goes back and she relives days with her child at different ages. I have grown kids. I've got a 25-year-old daughter and a 21-year-old daughter. And that has stayed with me all this time since I read the book, you know, right after it came out. What was your process to write those scenes? Do you have other children? And did you think through a lot of that or talk to, I don't know. I just thought that was a fascinating thing to add, especially into a thriller. And it just made it so much more interesting to me to have a thriller that had that much sort of internal depth with her character as a mom.
No, I don't have any children yet. But I have always been fascinated by, I'm lucky to know women that speak to me very candidly about motherhood, and how it's kind of a grief, because you love your 2-year-old son, but 2 years later he's 4, and the 2-year-old him has actually gone. He is not the same child at all, really. And it's like a constant evolving kind of grief, parenthood, I think. And I just thought it was so interesting that I wanted to write about that. And I think everybody would want a do-over at certain points of their life, but how precious that, as well as going back and seeing her father for the last time, she can see this 3-year-old Todd that no longer exists. I just thought it was so interesting. So yeah, it's mostly my friends actually that have talked to me about that.
I think that concept too of living your life, like having so many years, that you've lived, to go back. Like, I think what would I do differently if I went back to when my daughters were, 2 and 5 or something like that. It's just a fascinating concept. And I really thought through a lot of that when I was reading that book, and I'll probably go back and read the book again for that same reason. So thank you for putting that in there. I really enjoyed that.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome.
Thanks so much for that question. That was fantastic. All right, Kristen Bird, looks like you're up next. If you can go ahead and unmute.
Hi, Gillian.
Hi.
My first novel just came out last February, so I actually have a publishing question. I've been listening to your Honest Authors podcast, and I love it. But I'm just wondering if, after having such massive acclaim with this specific book, if you feel pressure now to write more speculative, or if you can kind of just keep that freedom within yourself to write what you want to write.
No, I don't feel that pressure. I'm not sure why, because it would be logical to feel it, I think. But I don't think readers ever want a wrong place, wrong time rehash. I think they want you to take a big swing and do something different if you want, but that is recognizably yours and is a great book. And my advice always to authors is put 99% of your time and energy into writing a great book, because the social media and the foreign rights and all of that will kind of sort themselves out, but actually the product, if you're like a farmer and you're growing potatoes, the most important thing is what you pull out of the ground and give to people. And that's kind of how I feel about books. So no, my next book has no speculative element. It's got a massive twist, which I'm very proud of. But yeah, it's firmly in the crime genre. But I think most of the people that read Wrong Place, Wrong Time read thrillers. So I think they'll like it.
Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Now we've got, and if I mispronounce your name, I apologize, but Siobhan, I'm going to put you up.
Very well done. Yes. You pronounce it better than my family doctor. So thanks.
I didn't know I was going to get that today.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Hi, Gillian. A huge fan here from India. It's 2 o'clock right now, 2 a.m.
Wow.
in India.
That is
yeah,
dedicated.
I stayed up for this.
Wow.
I actually wanted to ask you this question from an author's perspective, because I mean, this book has actually, blown all our minds. I'm pretty sure everybody in this call agrees to that. I just wanted to ask you, how did you learn to, the art of showing and not telling, which has been incredible in this novel? How do you show stuff to the reader and not exactly tell what's actually happening?
Wow, I don't think I've ever been asked that. I think that all writers have the urge to tell. I still do. I still want to say she felt sad about it because this thing that happened 20 years ago that the reader knows about, and you want to point it out for the reader. And I think self-editing, where if it doesn't break your heart too much, delete those bits. And I'm very lucky that my agent is an absolutely ruthless editor in this respect. And if I ever tell, she's like, puts a line through it. So I have good support in that respect. But I think it's basically about willpower and trusting your reader that they're going to know that her father's death's significant without you saying it, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's a leap I think you take as a writer.
Yeah, it is. You have to trust your reader and not patronize them, I think. And I think reading a lot where you kind of go, oh, right, okay, you've said that 3 times now. You get radar for it and you can stop doing those things, I think.
Okay,
Thank
amazing.
you so much.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Great
Thanks for staying up.
Definitely.
No problem.
All right. I'm going to add Caroline or Carolyn. Hi, go ahead.
Hi, Gillian. I actually
Hi.
wanted to ask your dad, Tony, what's your favorite book of Gillian's so far?
That's a very interesting question.
And why?
There's no doubt, and this is not BS. This Wrong Place, Wrong Time is definitely my favorite.
Better
it's,
than the new one?
difficult to say because the new one will have changed since I read it.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
No, this is very much a page turner for me. Normally, when I read Jill's books, okay, so I'll read it on a tablet in Kindle form, and I will make notes as I'm reading it to say, I don't really understand who was talking here, or whether it's a reflection of something that happened before, or what have you. So I'll make notes, and I find it really difficult to do it with this book because I was just wanted to swipe and just read it.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah,
I loved it too. It was a really unexpected. I don't read the synopsis before I start, so I was a little bit surprised, but in the best way.
Yeah.
Thanks for answering.
Had you been able to read any of Jill's books before, or no?
Yeah, I read the Good Sister a really long time ago, and I think I've read a few others as well, but I would have to look at Goodreads to know exactly what, because it was all a really long time ago. So this was the first one in years.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Thank you
All
for
right.
your questions.
Thanks, Tony. All right, let's go with Mom is Booked. Do you have a question? I'm going to go ahead and spotlight you.
Hi, thank you for hosting this, Laura. Hi, Gillian. First, I want to say congratulations on becoming a mama. It's the best thing in the world. I have a little boy too, so you're going to love it. I love that you and your friends speak candidly about motherhood. I think that's the only way to speak about it.
Totally.
Love it. Yeah, there's more good days than bad, so you've got
good. Yes, I'm in the very scared phase, so that's good to know.
My question for you is, if your son decides to follow in your footsteps, what would be your advice for him if he wanted to be a writer?
Wow, that is very interesting. Me and my husband had a very interesting chat, actually, because he likes his job and I like mine, and so we don't have unfulfilled dreams for our child, and we were actually saying, if he wants to go and be a painter decorator, we think that's actually quite a nice life, because we do work a lot, and definitely when you are a writer, I'm not really having a maternity leave, and even if I was, you can't turn your brain. I would have a novel idea, and so I would kind of warn him that he is signing up for a lifetime of never really being switched off. But if he wants to do it, the advice I give to all writers is to finish drafts, because that is where I think aspiring authors tend to sort of get caught up in the weeds, of not finishing things and tinkering over and over. And for me, I write a really bad first draft, but it's down, and that's the most helpful thing for me, I think.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thanks so much. All right, let's go. All right, we have Stephanie, and you have a question?
Yes, hi, thanks very much. I love this book, Gillian. I read a lot of thrillers, and this one was just spectacular. It's one of my favorites for this year. So a question that I had for you was, how did you keep track of the different timelines? As I read each chapter, I said, how is she keeping track of these various details? And it kind of builds on each other. So I'm fascinated to find out, how did you do it? Like, did you, have walls with different timelines? And that's my question to you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm lucky that I have a very good memory, which I think serves me really well in, I've just done an edit where I didn't have to reread stuff because I know if I change something, I know where it will have a knock-on effect. And I'm just lucky. But I did have, I had like 2 washing lines. I used to live in a house that had a very long kitchen. And on one line, I strung, because nobody was coming to my house and I wasn't going anywhere. So I sort of went all a bit, Carrie in Homeland when she makes the like pin board. That was me. So I had one timeline that was called What Happened. And it went from 2004 to the present day. And I had index card for each date, Joseph goes to prison, Joseph gets out of prison, etc. And then I had one that was what Jen knew. That was what it was called. And that went backwards. So each day when I wrote a scene, I took an index card with the matching date from each washing line, and then I went to write it like, this is what Jen's discovering. So yeah, it was kind of organized chaos in a way.
Very impressed.
I know. I love that visual. Thank you so much for that question, Stephanie.
Thank
All
you.
right, we have, I believe Laura is up next. So go ahead, ask your question.
Okay. Great. Hi, Laura Beth. Thanks for doing this.
Of course, good to see you.
Hi, Gillian. And thank you to Stephanie for asking that question. That was actually going to be my question. I was fascinated I listened to the audiobook and I was fascinated. I was like, but how, because I would have to stop and like think as I was walking my dog and how you kept up with that. But so I do have another question. I thoroughly enjoyed this book. This is the first of your books that I have read or listened to. Which of your books would you recommend I go to next?
I think the choice is very similar to Wrong Place, Wrong Time. It's different. It's about a woman who is sexually assaulted and she murders the person who did it. And as I said earlier, it's about a split narrative where in one strand she goes on the run and in the other she hands herself in and goes to prison for murder. Yeah, I would say probably that, although my new one is coming out next August. So you could also wait for that.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thanks for being with us today.
You're very welcome.
All right, we have Tasha. I don't know that she doesn't have her camera on, but I think she has a question. Go ahead, Tasha.
Yes, hi, can you hear me?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, so hi, Gillian. My name is Tasha. Okay, so we know the husband is one of the significant characters in this book. The twist kind of involves his character. So my question is, was it tricky to portray his character while also keeping the reader on his side? Because clearly he has secrets to keep and his character keeps getting suspicious as the story progresses. So.
Yeah, it was. And I ummed and ahed about it for so long because I didn't want it to, I wanted it to be about Jen saving Todd from, committing this crime. And I worried a lot, would it just become like a total left field moment when it's about the husband? But yeah, I'm glad I stuck with it because actually Todd's actions were about the husband. And yeah, he was hard to characterize because you think he's just the way he is. And then you realize he's a product of what he's been through. And that is why I ultimately narrated Ryan, because I felt like you needed an actual direct explanation of why he becomes the way he becomes, and you kind of needed to see it from his perspective, even if you kind of didn't realize that was what was happening at the time.
Okay, if you don't mind, I do have one more question, if that's okay. So do you have any books that you would recommend to readers who enjoy Wrong Place, Wrong Time, or maybe any other books with similar themes?
Yeah, I really enjoyed a book called Impossible by Sarah Lotz. Which is it's a romance, which is not a million miles away from what I write. And it's about 2 people who meet over email and they fall in love over email. And at the moment when they decide to meet up in person, they both go to a London train station and they are both under the clock in the station, but they can't see each other. And you realize they are from multiverses and so can't meet. It's very similar in that respect, but I just loved it.
Sounds really great.
Interesting. Thank you.
All right, looks like Liz. I'm going to go ahead and ask you to unmute and get you spotlighted. Go ahead, Liz.
Hey, great. Well, thank you so much for meeting with us, Gillian and Lauren, Beth, for organizing this. Really an incredible book. Thank you so much. I think this question was asked in a way, but I really wanted to, again, talk about your presentation of motherhood and particularly mom's guilt. I think the sense of this mom's guilt was just like amazingly and artfully highlighted. And I just, again, wanted to ask you, like, how were you able to tap into that? And also kind of guilt and then forgiveness towards the end and acceptance.
Yeah, I think the shame that Jen feels is ubiquitous amongst women. So I don't have to imagine shame because I think all women feel it because of the roles dictated to us in society. And, you know, even I think mum guilt starts at conception, and suddenly the standard becomes you must completely martyr yourself, and anything below that is not acceptable. And that is not how life is in any other area of life. You would never go to the dentist and not want pain relief, for example. And I do think a lot of women experience the kind of internalization of that, of I'm not good enough. And, you know, most women with children who work are trying to juggle something that it's just actually not possible to be amazing at both, because we're spinning too many plates. And as I said earlier, I have friends that have children and who have spoken to me so candidly about moments they've lost their temper and feel like they're a bad mom because of that, and moments they felt like they were so pissed off with their sciatica in pregnancy that, you know, they regretted it for a moment. And all of these things that are so human, but society imposes a level of shame on women. So I really wanted to write about that because to me, you know, no man is sitting around, you know, thinking, I feel guilty about going to work, you know. That just doesn't really happen to fathers, and it does happen to mothers, and it's so unequal still. And I really wanted to explore that.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. I felt like that was, obviously it was a thriller, but I feel like that theme was just so important and kind of liberating and cleansing.
Yeah, I'm glad. I wanted to redeem her at the end, you know, the scene where Todd turns to her and the way he looks at her, she knows he loves her, and that's all that matters. And all that matters is she wanted to do her best, even if she didn't manage it, because who can? You know, it was so important for me to redeem her, and I could never write a book where she had caused it with her parenting, because really I was saying all that matters, like, if you have mum guilt, you're a good mum because it means you care.
Thank you.
I agree.
You're welcome.
Well, I agree. I mean, so much you think, oh, is this my fault? Anything bad goes wrong in their lives and you think, is it my fault? And I will say I really resonated because I have a 17-year-old son.
Okay.
And he's abroad right now in Germany. So I'm thinking, oh, like, anyways, it's just, it's been a fantastic, you know, it was beautiful. Rosie, I think we have one more. I'm going to ask you to ask a question. Go ahead.
Hi. Thank you. Hi, Gillian. So my question is, how do you pick your character names? I've always wanted to ask an author this. And also, if your son does arrive on his due date, will you be calling him Todd?
I have lobbied tirelessly for 8 months to call him Todd, but my husband he thinks this would be an act of supreme egoism. So I don't think he will be Todd. And I think, to be fair, he would do better than to grow up in the shadow of his mother's bestseller. So I think his own name is probably for the best. But yeah, character names are really important, and I don't like it when, you know, I like to be edited generally, but when my editors or agents suggest a character name change, I really don't like it because they are who they are. So I would try and keep them in keeping with their time, you know, like Jen is 43, and so she's probably not going to be called Molly. You know, I like to kind of keep it real in that sense. And usually I just browse Nameberry, more for my novels than I do for my child, and I find names similar to, and usually I just hit on one that I really like. And I'm actually trying to name the heroine in my current book because I'm not very happy with what I called her as a sort of temporary name to just get the draft going, and I haven't found the one yet. And you sort of just know when you find it. It's a very strange process.
Have you ever
That's
asked
great.
your readers for insight? Because I know the last author chat, Diane Chamberlain, she puts it out there and says, hey, give me your ideas.
Oh, really? I might do that on Instagram because yeah, I am struggling a bit with the current one. So yeah, I might do that.
Great question, Rosie. Thanks so much. All right. Well, I just have a couple of quick questions that just to follow up. You mentioned family lore when you mentioned the Eagles, and I know that was the name of the law firm. So what's the family lore?
Oh, my dad can answer this question, actually. It's somebody he knows who gave their name in my book. So over to him.
Okay, excellent.
A really good friend of mine, Mark Eagles. I think Jill had there was some kind of a Facebook thing going on where she was, for charity, she was selling the name in a book. And Mark said to me, you know, what's the ceiling on this bid? Because I've bid £150 and we're not there. And I said, oh, you don't need to do that, you know. I had a word with Jill, and so somebody else won that for whatever value, I don't know. And then, but they've got a really interesting story. So Mark's dad was called Kenneth Charles Eagles, and Mark's daughter was born shortly after Ken unfortunately passed away, and they called her Casey, so that it's KC Eagles, and they called her Casey, and Jill just went, oh wow, that's going in my book, you know. Part of the book, but makes Jill feel happy, makes Mark and his family feel happy, makes me feel happy. Yeah, that's it.
I love it. I love those personal connections into a book. Thank you for
I like to put those things in.
One other quick question. I've seen a comma in the title in some of it.
Yeah.
Is that in some or not in others, or what's the deal with the comma?
I think it's on this one, actually. Yeah, it began, so this is a proof. It began life with a comma, and then the UK said, we don't want the comma. So they took it off their proof, and then we told the US and they took it off their proof, so that the final one doesn't have a comma.
Okay,
very boring publishing behind the scenes.
And then one other thing, I saw in one of your posts that you said that this book was a career risk. Can you explain what you mean by that?
Yeah, I mean, I write across crime and women's fiction, as the questions will attest. You know, this book is not a straight thriller. And my UK career was going very well, but my US career was not. And I think to add a third genre, you know, this book, people don't know how to describe it. On Instagram, I see I'm tagged in this thing that's like, it's a romance at the end, it's a speculative novel, and it's a thriller. So my agent, about this time last year, I had probably 10 American rejections in a row. And she said, I think it's a genre problem. And we knew it might be. And then I got one offer from William Morrow, and then they just knocked it out of the park, you know, got it in for Reese's book club, and the rest is history. But I think it is risky to dabble in genre. And unfortunately, I can only really write what I want to write. You know, I could never write a book about a Hindu thriller just, you know, because I knew it would sell. I can't do that. So I knew it was a risk, but I sort of wanted to take it anyway, because I thought, you know, with big risks comes big rewards. Like if you're just following a genre completely middle of the road, you're probably not going to get the sort of opportunities you might get by kind of thinking outside the box a bit, maybe.
Well, yeah, I think it was a risk worth taking. So yay. Now, you mentioned also, just really quick, that some of your books have been optioned. So any news on that? Anything on the forefront that we can look forward to?
I wish I could divulge all, but I cannot. But some are under option, and more news to come.
Okay, so and I will say, you know, follow her on Instagram, and hopefully we'll find out more info with that. But you know, our time is up. I'm sad it went by so quickly. I tried to save more time because I knew a lot of people wanted to ask questions. So thank you so much. We really appreciate you and your dad, Tony, for stepping in and chatting with us today. Again, check out her Instagram. She's fantastic. I did notice when I was, you know, talking to a lot of readers that you comment, and I know the readers love you because you comment on their posts. Y'all raise your hand. How many of you did she, like or comment on your posts? Look at that. Look at that.
I do try to. It's getting out of control. I'm still trying to, but I do miss some these days. But I'm glad. I'm glad it doesn't go unnoticed.
No,
I do it. I finish my words at like 6 o'clock. Then I walk the dog, and then I lie on the sofa and I do my Instagram comments, which takes like another hour.
Well, your readers love you for it. So I know it's overwhelming, but all in all, it's been a fantastic experience reading this and engaging with you. So again, thank you so much. If y'all don't mind, follow me, the LBs, the Lover of Books. I'm on Instagram, on Facebook, and go ahead and subscribe to my YouTube channel. You'll find out when all my recordings are uploaded. I'd love for you to watch those. Next Sunday, September 25th at 8 p.m., I'm hosting author Barbara Borland for her novel, The Force of Such Beauty here. The Washington Post says, "This is not your grandma's fairy tale. Borland's brilliant satire skewers the theatrics of power, excessive materialism, and economic corruption. It's inspired by the alleged attempts of real-life princesses and set in a grotesque and gaudy pre-recession 2000s Europe. The Force of Such Beauty is a heart-wrenching and compulsively readable testament to the way in which real-life power struggles around the world untimely rest on the subjugation of women's bodies." I think it's going to be a fantastic discussion. I hope everybody gets a chance to read it. Thank you, Mike, for running the background. And if you know of an author that you'd like to hear from, please let me know. And I'm just so excited to talk to you tonight, Gillian. Good luck. I know you're going to be a fantastic mother, and we wish you the best. Thanks, Tony.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everybody.